Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Qualia. Both Pradeep and myself are from the state of Tamil Nadu, which is all set to have its 16th assembly elections on April 6th. As first time voters, at least in the MLA elections, both of us share our thoughts, feelings, and doubts that we have around the politics happening in this election season. Let's get started. Pradeep, if you are watching news channels or walking on the streets, I'm sure over the past couple of months you would have noticed the festive season that is happening all over the state of Tamil Nadu. You see, this whole thing of elections happening in this or for the reason any democratic country fascinates me because, at least in India, where we have seen it, we have party workers with that colorful designer flags holding strange objects like a pressure cooker, etc., that represent their party symbols. We see political leaders talking to large crowds. We see people bursting firecrackers, people banging drums, etc. It's like every single person is celebrating on the streets. What do you think about this whole festive season that's happening around this particular time?
Okay, Rohan, I've been following this election closely. For as a matter of fact, you know that I'm at home for the past 1 year now because of the COVID outbreak. Everyone in my family is into politics. It's like we talk a lot of politics and stuff. So this election, I've been following it real close, and I think that out of all countries in the world, India has unique political systems. For example, politics in India is not just the war of ideologies, because unlike other countries where politics is mostly between the conservatives and the liberals, in India, politics is there in every subsection that people have been divided as. That's why in India, when it's the season of election, it's almost like a festival. Every caste, every religion, they rejoice this because they feel that they get to be part of something as a member of their group. For example, you know that most of the vote banks in Tamil Nadu, they are they are vote banks of caste. People of some particular caste vote a representative belonging to their own caste into power. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. We'll leave it to the later part of the conversations. What I'm saying is people come together in groups and people enjoy things that they do in groups. For God's sake, man, people enjoy going to war in groups. The standpoint where they can identify themselves with a group, identify peoples of other group, this is what's giving out this festive vibe about elections. I'd like to know like how this election is different for you compared to all the elections that you must have witnessed in your life.
Okay, so I'm that guy who isn't that into politics. I don't talk about it to anyone, even to my family members, because politics is a subject where every side of the coin seems right and it has more than two sides. And it always baffled me that how could so many people be correct at the same time. So I was that guy who never gave that much interest into politics. But once I turned 18, which is the legal age to vote in India, once I turned 18 and I got my voter ID card, I was able to vote in the MP elections that happened in 2019. So, yeah, that was my first experience of really going into politics, because when that election approached, I was forced to ask myself the question about voting and what's a vote and whom to vote and what's the actual purpose of all this and do I really have a power and all that sorts of. So it's that time that I first truly got into it's like understanding what is happening here. And the experience to all those listeners who haven't cast their vote yet in any of the elections, and the experience is like surreal. You have all these policemen guarding the booths and everything, and then you walk into a school classroom and you have people first checking your ID cards and then applying a special ink which we like to post with after we have voted in our social media accounts, and once the ink is cast we are then asked to cast our vote, and you have so many symbols on that single electronic device, and you click the symbol that you want to vote for, and then you have opposite to you, you have workers from all the parties who stand there and like make some calculation of what's happening, who's to expect what vote, and then you come out from that room. It's a process of just 2 minutes, but the whole process is very surreal. I'm sure Pradeep, you'll experience it this time when you go for voting. So yeah, that was my first contact with politics, and then it's actually strange, because it's so difficult in India. At least India is that democratic country where it's so difficult to find information about your candidates, information about the candidates that are from your constituency, especially in United States. I have seen this, that there is so much information on every candidate that is contesting in the elections. So India, in that way, you are exposed to only the candidates who have very high budgets to spend. And I feel that's also a dark side of the politics. And at the brighter side, you look at all the festivities that is happening. But on the darker side, you also have this fact that people with money get exposed out to the public, to the members of their constituency. And then there is also this statistics in the states that 91% of the candidate who spends more eventually wins the election. So yeah, that's some dark side that I have witnessed. And it's like I remember I actually made an effort in last elections to actually know the candidates who are standing from my constituency. I think there were about 16 candidates, out of which 6 candidates were from the major parties, and the other candidates I had no information about. They were all independent candidates. Even India being a multi-party democracy, I don't feel that politics happens between all the members who are standing. And sorry for rambling here, but yeah, this is something that I have witnessed about this election that happens in our country.
Actually, I don't see what is the bright side of all these festivities, because if you see on surface and as deep as it goes, it is just pure fraternization. It is people are easy to rule when you divide and rule. So all these festivities and celebrations, I don't think that this is doing us any good. I don't think this is the right way for election to happen. Like, you can have people who are fighting around different ideologies, but still, even that would be fraternizing. But still, you always need to have someone who says yes and someone who says no to something. Only that way, you'll keep reevaluating the ideology at hand. And this constant reevaluation, this is really essential for anything. Coming to the important question, though, how do you think that we should vote in elections? Like, do we have to vote on the basis of who's standing in our constituency, on the worthiness of that person? For example, you can have an independent candidate who has been a lawyer for like 40 years, who has got into several social services and stuff. He must have made many protests for many of the government policies which were opposed by any specific minorities. There's this guy. Would you vote for him, or would you vote for someone who doesn't deserve it but belongs to a big political party? Who would you vote for? The question is quite simple. Anyone who listens to this question will say directly that I would vote for the independent candidate who's really worthy. But the bigger question at hand is, once someone is being elected, and if that independent candidate needs something for his constituency, for the people of his constituency, he has to run to the state government to ask for funds or to ask for approval or something. But the state government is not independent. The state government is run by one specific party, the party which has majority. I think most of us will agree that independent candidates are not treated in the same way by parties at power as candidates of their own party. So what do you think, Rohan? How do we have to vote?
I think different people may have different approach to this question, and it's a very difficult question. And I'm sure the answer that I'm going to give, with the experience that I have, I'm sure that that is not the correct answer, at least. Before going to your question, I'd like to make some things clear that, you see, the biggest disadvantage of a democratic government is that I'll take this idea from the economist Milton Friedman. See, there are 4 types of spending that you can have. That is, you can spend money in 4 ways. First way is that you spend your money on you. It's like that's the majority of spending. You buy new clothes for you, you buy an ice cream for you. That fulfills you a lot and that makes you happy very much. The second type of spending is like you spend money on others. Say you buy a book for your friend, you buy clothes for your mother, or you make your parents happy with a gift. So that's the second type of spending, and that is also has a certain level of fulfillment. The third type of spending is you spend others' money on you. Like we used to use the college funds to go to quizzes and other competitions. So it's like we used other people's money and then we spend it on us, so we could in a way achieve certain things, and in that also you could find a certain level of decency in the spending. Majority people would always have a clear tab on what they were spending, but the problem comes in the fourth type of spending where you spend others money on others. You see, that's the whole point of politics. Once the government forms and once the people who have been elected, they are now given with the options of what they are going to do with huge amounts of taxpayers money. So this is the most difficult part of the equation where you spend others money on others. From the point of view of the politician, you'll always spend taxpayers money on initiatives that gives you maximum incentives. So this is the major disadvantage that we find in the modern democratic politics. And one more thing is, we are all, in my experience, the people I have met are all honest taxpayers and they pay tax on every item that they buy in the market. So what happens is, say on an average, 30% of the money you earn is spent in tax. Say on an average, just to keep the calculation simple. So in a way, if you extrapolate this idea, of the 12 months in a year, you end up working 3 months for the government. Okay, so in a way, you're working 3 months for the government for free, and you're telling them that, see, I'm working for you for a part of 3 months, and now you provide the basic necessities that I will need of the whole year. So this is the requirement end of the spectrum, and spending other people's money on others is the incentive side of the spectrum. So in between, now we have to decide on where do we lie on the idea of voting, because when voting, you make sure that you select the right guy who will spend your hard-earned money on you the way you want. Okay, so it's totally singular in the sense that depends everything on you, because humans are basically, in the majority cases, humans are selfish. So they have a selfish nature to them on everything that they do, even the good things that they end up doing. So at the end, when you select a person to spend your money on you for you, it's important that we think on who's the right person rather than thinking about something larger than the choices that we have in our hands. The point that you raised, that hey, I elect an independent candidate who's good. Once I elect him, he'll face challenges once he goes to the legislative assembly. Yeah, that is a valid concern, but it's a disadvantage. But I think it's a disadvantage that we must risk taking, because I feel the only thing in our hand is to elect that person who will represent us. So yeah, I think I still stand with my point of view that the candidates that we choose must solely be selfishly selected for our own reasons rather than considering some other things that we have no control over. And there can be so many different point of views which are all correct when seen from that angle. So yeah, this may not be the correct answer from other point of view, but this is what seems correct to me at least.
I think we have to get specific a little bit. Let's come down from the national politics. Like, the national politics. The national politics is mainly religious. There are two big parties. One party, they come out blunt as a religious party with a religious agenda. And there's this other party who claim to be secular, but still they rely on these fraternizations for their vote banks to be intact. So now, when you come to the state, in Tamil Nadu, we see that Congress has been the ruling party here before the emergence of the Dravidian parties. Let's start with where it all started from. Arinyar Anna and Tandai Periyar, they see social injustice in the society. So they go on rallies, they go from corner to corner, they have opposing views against the government, which was then Congress in Tamil Nadu. they felt that certain part of the population, they were being dealt injustice. So these people, they were fighting for them. And eventually, they took up the ideology of opposition of Hindi in Tamil Nadu. They raised a war of languages. They raised a war of cultures. They said that Hindi couldn't be brought into Tamil Nadu. And that way, they got all the Tamil people under the belt of language fraternizing. And these people, now they are willing to vote for these newly emerged parties rather than Congress. And in the history of India, this has been an ideological revolution of an enormous scale in any political regime. What I would like to stress is how important are ideologies for politics? Because according to me, people are suckers of ideologies. People adopted very strange ideologies. For example, Scientology, there's communism, there's Marxism. So, how do you think ideology affects politics? According to me, people are suckers for ideology. And I think that ideology has a lot more role to play than it is playing here. And moreover, I want to stress that elections are not about giving free stuff. And Tamil Nadu is going towards a doom because of this sole reason that election has become a season to give free stuff to people or to promise to give free stuff to people, which they eventually don't end up doing. Even if they end up doing, it's even worse. You spoil the people, and the next time when you say you're going to give something, people will ultimately be wired to think that, okay, even if he does not give the 10 things that he promised to give, he gives at least 2 things. If other political parties with good ideologies, even if they emerge, they are not going to give me those 2 things for free. So apart from all this free stuff and all this bullshit political elements aside, how much of an impact do you think ideology delivers on politics?
On a side note, candidate from I think Madurai constituency, what he did was he's an independent candidate, and he promised the members of his constituency that he would give every member an iPhone. He would give 1 crore rupees in their bank account, and he'll also take them to moon. And it's kind of done
You
in
forgot the
sarcasm.
car, Rohan.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
forgot the car. He said that he'll give like 15 lakh worth cars to every house.
Yeah, no, it was at the end, it was sarcasm on the government and the opposition promising everyone the free stuff. So it was just a way to educate people that don't vote for free stuff, vote for the ideology, or vote for the thing that you believe in, vote for yourself. So that was his message. So yeah, that was on a side note. And back to your question, Pradeep. You see, yeah, it's right. People identify themselves with a particular ideology. I have personally met people from various different backgrounds who strongly associate with a particular party because of the ideology that the party was initially started with, or in certain cases, the party managed to represent that particular ideology or the sense of caste and everything. So basically, people want to feel that there is a fight happening between us versus them. From the point of view of the citizens that reside here, I think it's very important that you include the members of your state in one form or the other, using their identity that they want to associate themselves with, so that they feel that they are in a fight, they feel they are involved, and they actually work for you, they actually spread your message, they actually ask other people to vote. I see some sort of tribal psychology at play here. I'm sure you could explain more on the tribal psychological aspect that's happening. And one more thing is, like, it's very difficult to actually start a party that has a very strong ideology and actually to reach places like winning an election or something like that. If you see from for the last 20 years, 20 years is a very long time. And in these 20 years, there has only been one new party which has been successful, and that's the Aam Aadmi Party. In the last 20 years, there hasn't been a single party that has actually contested in the elections and won the chief ministerial position or MLAs or MPs, that kind of stuff, and has actually been brought to power by the people, as the Aam Aadmi Party was able to do. So you see how difficult it is to get into this ideology mode. and then bring people together to vote for them. Yeah, so that's some psychology that's playing here, and I would like to know your thoughts on that.
Yes, the tribal mentality indeed. You know, people say that sports is an alternative for war. You know, in war, you have two sides. You have a side which wins and you have a side which lose. And in war, it is a matter of land, pride, and a lot of other factors. In sports, it's a matter of pride. It's a matter of you associate yourself with something. You know, take the most deepest social construct which runs deeply in your blood. That construct will have more to offer you than any rational thought that you have ever heard or had in life. For example, you take a religious person. To that religious person, religion speaks. To you and me, it is just another religion which is out there. It is just a product of human cognition and human consciousness. But to a person who's deeply religious, to that person, the religion speaks. And how does the religion speak? The religion says, do this, don't do this. The religion says, you don't have to take responsibility for the worst pain that happens in your life. There is God for it. Like, blame it on God, or you ask God to correct things out for you. This way, religion has a fundamental moral built into it. Like, do this, do that. And at the next level, I think that Mark Manson, the one who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck and Everything is Fucked, he describes in his second book, Everything is Fucked, he describes how to start a religion. He tells a series of 6 steps. I don't remember all the 6 steps, but he tells a series of six steps, out of which these 2 steps, they are really relevant and they are really essential. Step 1 is to build a moral and ethical structure. And step 2, which in my view is really important, and what people do often, is to create an us versus them. Like, everyone who follows this religion, everyone who comes to this worship place, like once in a week or something, that person is an us. That person belongs to us. And every other person who doesn't, and every person who questions our morals, our ethics, that person is a them. This distinction of us versus them, I think this is why people who are really religious are really religious. So, this tribal mentality which you speak, politics is a matter of religion, caste, race, and everything else. So, I think that this tribal mentality is being fed so much that this grows into a huge potential issue between people of different religion, people of different caste and races. So, yeah, the tribal mentality is here. And moreover, Rohan, I think we have a duty here. The mainstream media, you know how shitty it is. The mainstream media, especially with the Tamil Nadu elections, there's this 4 5 channels which majorly cover this election story. They do direct and indirect propaganda for the parties which pay the most. And most of these channels are owned by either the ruling party or the opposition party. Guess what? Who has the most money? Both the parties. So, what happens in one break? You have the advertisement of the ruling party. And in the next break, you have the advertisement of the opposition party. I've heard from my dad that elections and propaganda used to be worse back then. Now that the election commission has been given adequate power, it has regulated things down to a decent level. I think that election commission should take more responsibility into its hands and cut down on all these propaganda. Like, it is a real good tradition in US where the two presidents sit and debate. People are entitled to see the clarity of the leader that they are investing their trust in. So that way, I think that what the mainstream media does is absolute bullshit. And here, I'd like to know your valuable input on the TN election. Like, what do you see as the most important aspect, or who do you see as the most important aspect of this election? Like, what are the big changes which are being brought in, and what do you see, Rohan?
Okay, in this particular election, what happens is, if you had noticed the newspapers and news channels, parties, especially like ADMK and DMK, who are the biggest two parties, they started advertisements 6 months back, and they spent crores and crores of money on front page ads, prime time slots, and every way possible. They spend crores of money in doing that. And on the other side, from the perspective of the media houses, what happens is that media basically survives on the advertisements. Okay, because we actually pay 0 rupees for certain news channels that we see in our television. So media has the only form of collecting revenue is through advertisements. And when you have your main contributor as the political parties, then it's not in your incentive to actually show bad things about them. So it's in your personal business interest that you will always show the mediocre version of all the important advertisers or advertisements that you get from the important parties. So that's your incentive. So the people who are eventually going to vote, they get their news from the news channels, newspapers, now even social media. But the three of them, news channels, newspapers, and the social media, work on this broken model of advertisements. How will you write against the biggest contributor? So that's a conundrum that's happening in the whole news industry. So at the end, people are always fed propaganda. And based on this propaganda, people decide whom to vote. And another bad thing that news channels do that I must point out now is that they push people to extremes. In real life, all the people that I have talked to, I have found them to be center. They are not left leaning or right leaning. Yeah, I have met people who are strongly left leaning and strongly right leaning, but they are very few. The majority of people that I have met and spoken to are people who are in the center, but they have certain biases that they have formed due to their own life experiences. And what media does is they run these propagandas where they push people from the center to one of the extremes based on who pays the more money. So this is a good point that you brought up. And another point that I totally agree with you is that here people don't sit and talk. You gave the example of the United States where presidents actually debated over the policies that they are going to bring and everything like that. Here, none of this happens. Here, I have seen MLA candidates come to each one of their houses and then ask for vote, and then it's like begging, man. They are literally like begging, and yeah, eventually they'll make us suffer, but initially they start this suffering by begging. So they beg for vote, and then they expect us to make a decision based on how good their begging was. Yeah, I know it's harsh, but that's what happens. I also strongly feel that all the candidates must talk. I feel that election commission itself must take under it that it should organize debates like this in every constituency, so all the people are informed about who the right representative for them is, rather than voting for a particular emblem or a particular person. So yeah, these are my thoughts on that. And one more thing that I have noticed, Pradeep, is that if you see, last legislative election, especially in Tamil Nadu, happened in 2016, and at that time you had both the important star leaders, as you would call them. You had the Chief Minister J. Jayalalitha on the one hand, and you had the DMK Supremo Karunanidhi in the other hand. And now, if you see in this particular election, you have this huge power vacancy that has been created in both the parties. And do you think this will make this particular election any special than the other ones that have been happened?
Oh boy, I do have to talk about this. As you mentioned, the two big parties which have been ruling over Tamil Nadu for the past 50 years, today, I think they are not at an all-time high. Both these parties had giants, political giants, people who were faces of the party, people who were faces of almost the last 50 years of Tamil Nadu politics. Today, in this election, we don't have those two people, the late leader of ADMK and the late leader of DMK. Compared to those leaders, the leaders who have taken the throne of leadership of these two parties today, I think that these people are not as connected as those two people were with the people of Tamil Nadu. They might have money. Actually, as you said, 91% of the time, people with money, they win elections. So you would think that the face is not such a big deal. But before money ever played a hand in elections, at least for Tamil Nadu, I think ideologies and faces of their leaders. And we would know from the great Dr. MGR, we know that a face which demanded the attention and love of all Tamil Nadu people, which made an actor who they saw in screens as the leader of their state. So these two giants are at an all time weak state. At the same time, there is this new entry in the battlefield. There is Dr. Kamal Hassan with his Makkal Needhi Mayam, and he's someone that I respect a lot. He has made like futuristic movies 20 years back with great philosophy. So this man is a futuristic person, and this man has strong ideals. Moreover, this man has a cinema background, so he is using that, and he is using his knowledge accumulated over the years. He's coercing these both regimes, and he has now come into the battlefield, and he has merged with other parties. And on the other hand, I really take pride in saying this, and you might think I am polarized. I am polarized. We are all polarized at some level. So there's this party called the Nam Tamizhar Katchi. When the two giants of Tamil Nadu, ADMK and DMK, when they are talking about equal rights for men and women, when one party announces, I'm going to give 1,000 rupees for women in a household, the other party says the next day, okay, I'll give 1,500 rupees. While people are doing cheap politics of this kind, while they say one thing in their manifesto about giving equal rights for men and women, there is this party, Nam Tamizhar Party. This party has given equal number of constituencies to their candidates, to their men and women candidates in the 234 constituencies. There is 117 seats for women and 117 seats for men. I would not like to comment on the individual candidates, even though they are all graduates and stuff. The candidates and their qualifications aside, what I see is, I see a very strong ideology that is blooming from the roots of the Tamil culture again. And moreover, what I love about this ideology is, you know that I don't like any form of fraternizing. The party's name, it might be misleading to you, but the party focuses on environmental development, they focus on sustainable development and self-reliance. You should hear to the leader of this party talk, and I think you will be really amazed. No one in Tamil Nadu today talks like this leader, and I'm pretty sure that he is one of the most fearful leaders with great ideology, and they don't get the recognition, or they are not even in the vicinity of people, just because these two giants, the ruling and the opposition party, these two giants, they have enough money to mask all the other potential parties and just show that they both exist in this plane and no one else. The voters, the first time voters, or you might be a voter for nth time, I think that you need to investigate who the people are, who the parties are, who the leaders are. The leader is the one who is ultimately going to lead the state. So in that fashion, I would suggest that you get into knowing the ideologies of different parties, because the two main parties, they don't have any ideologies. Their only ideology is to win election and criticize the opposition. So I'd rather say that today we've all had the privilege of being learned. We should use the smallest amount of cognitive energy to figure out which ideology is going to work better environmentally, regionally, and globally, so that we can choose the right leader for the people.
Yeah, that was beautifully put, Pradeep. And I think at the end of the day, I would request everyone to vote. And on the second point, I would request everyone to take a little time out of their schedule and look at the candidates, at their leaders, at the policies that they are offering, at the arguments that they are making. We, as the citizens of this country and this state, we enjoy a lot of benefits that we don't really notice in our everyday life. But if on the one hand, where we enjoy these benefits, on the other hand, I think at the times of elections, I feel it's our duty to actually sit and make a thorough choice of whom we are electing to represent us. Yeah, so that's something we both would like you to take out of this episode of the podcast. That's it for this episode of Qualia. We would love to hear on what you think about our show. You could always mail us your thoughts and comments at pod.qualia@gmail.com, or you could also follow us at qualia_pod on Instagram. Stay tuned and see you guys in the next one.